What do we do when it feels like nothing is working? What do we do when it feels like everything in our life and our business is working against us and it feels like the universe just wants us to give up? We might be kind of looking online, looking at other people's social media profiles and thinking, well, they've got everything figured out and everything seems to be working for them. And what are they doing that I'm not? So what I really want to focus on today is giving you some tangible strategies, hopefully putting some things into perspective for you, but giving you something concrete that when you're having one of those days and those weeks, you can actually use. These three things, these specific strategies, I promise will really help you to push through the other side. So, if you've ever had one of those days, weeks, or even months where you feel like just giving up on your business, throwing in the towel, and maybe going to find a job, then this is just for you. What I want to share with you are three really powerful strategies that you can use in your own life and business when it just feels like things aren't going your way. It feels like whatever you're trying just isn't working. These are the three things that I do in my own life, in my own business, and with our clients to get them through that dip, to get them through those hard times, keep them pushing forward and come out the other side even stronger. I see a lot of people online celebrating how great their life is, especially some other kind of coaches and consultants that I follow. They're always sharing the wins of their clients. Look how much money this person just earned, or look at all these great things that are happening. And often when things aren't going well for you, it can actually be more demotivating. It feels like everybody else is winning apart from you. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the other side of the coin. I wanted to focus a little bit on what do we do when it feels like nothing is working? What do we do when it feels like everything in our life and our business is working against us and it feels like the universe just wants us to give up? And often days we probably feel like that as well. Maybe we feel like we just can't even be bothered to get out of bed. What's the point? Why are we even doing this in the first place? This person's so much more successful than me. And we might be kind of looking online, looking at other people's social media profiles and thinking, well, they've got everything figured out and everything seems to be working for them. And maybe they're younger than you. That's something that definitely happens for me. I see these 20-year-old kids crushing it and building these multiple seven-figure businesses. And I think, what are they doing that I'm not? Right? So what I really want to focus on today is giving you some tangible strategies, hopefully putting some things into perspective for you, but giving you something concrete that when you're having one of those days and those weeks, you can actually use. You can get down on a piece of paper in front of you. You can actually have something where you say, right, this is what I do step by step to make this less difficult, to make me want to push through and want to keep working. Recently, I had a series of things happened to me, predominantly in my personal life, but some things in business as well. And all of those things came together at once, right? An ending of a relationship, a house that I was trying to buy falling through, a family member not being very well. And it really felt like at that time, everything around me was just kind of falling to pieces. And these times in our life are really hard. There's no denying that. There's not a magic wand that all of a sudden you're feeling these things, you wave it and it goes away. In fact, I really advocate, and I've learned the power of actually just letting those things be and letting those emotions exist and actually feeling into those feelings and giving yourself permission to feel the things that you feel. So there's a lot to be said for that. What I want to focus on here is once you've felt those feelings and maybe they're going on for longer than you would like, or maybe you just find yourself not reacting necessarily to a specific event, like a massive life event, like the ending of a relationship or, a house that you were buying falling through, or some of the examples I just gave. Maybe it's just a general feeling that you're at that point in your business where things just feel really tough and you feel like you just kind of want to give up. You've lost that kind of passion, you've lost that energy for what you do, and the days and the weeks are starting to feel quite hard. These three things, these specific strategies, I promise will really help you to push through the other side. So there's three big ideas that I want to share with you first. And then I'm going to talk about a framework of actually something tangible we can come back to when we're having these days. So I'll share the big ideas with you first, and I'll kind of talk you through each one. And then we'll put it down into kind of practical, implementable steps that you can practice daily, weekly, monthly. So the first big idea is this concept that your focus actually determines how you feel, or your focus kind of feeds the emotions that you have. And so when I think about this, I really do imagine I'm looking through a camera lens. Now I can move that camera wherever I want. I can zoom into something very specific. And so I have the power to determine, like, what am I going to zoom into? What am I going to focus on? And that's sort of how our brain works. If you look into psychological literature, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that our subconscious brain processes a much larger amount of information than our conscious kind of thinking brain. So the brain that you're listening to this video with, the brain that you read with, the brain that you make decisions with is often referred to as our conscious brain, the things that we think about. And our subconscious brain is kind of everything else happening in the background, everything from the things that keep us alive to memories that we have, everything else that's kind of not in our thinking brain. And so what tends to happen is we control what information is kind of passed between those two things. So I'll give you an example. You've probably all had this experience where you buy a new car, or you buy a new item of clothing, or a watch, or something that's like quite a significant purchase for you. And almost the moment that you buy that thing, you go out into the street and you start spotting other people with that thing, with that t-shirt, with that dress, with that car. Like you've probably had that experience where you buy a car and all of a sudden you start seeing that car everywhere. Oh, I didn't realize so many people had this car, right? And it's not that there's more of that thing all of a sudden. All that's happening is that you've demonstrated to your conscious brain that this thing is important to you, and now you have identified with it. It's part of you. This is your car. This is your dress. This is your watch, right? So it becomes a conscious part of your reality. And so your subconscious brain starts pointing out all of those things to you that existed before but weren't part of your thinking reality. And so you've controlled that focus by purchasing that item. And this is actually happening every single day. There's so much stuff happening in your world and in your life. What we tend to do, especially I know this is true for business owners and creative business owners, especially if you're quite a high performer, I know myself, what we tend to do is we tend to focus on all the things that aren't working. We tend to focus on the clients that aren't happy. We tend to focus on, oh, this month wasn't quite as good financially as previous months. Or if it's maybe better than last month, we focus on, well, what are the risks here? Am I going to be able to do that again next month? And we're actually quite hard on ourselves. So the first big idea that I want to share with you is that what you focus on actually feeds how you feel. So those days when you feel like you're giving up, one of the first things that we do, if I have a client that comes to me and just says, nothing's working, I've tried this, I'm feeling really rubbish, what I can hear there is what they're focusing on is all the things that aren't working. So one of the first things that I will do is I'll ask them, okay, well, what is working? So we're actually able to control our focus. And I'll tell you a bit more about exactly how we do that. And I'll give you a structure to follow in a minute. But that's the first big idea, that we have the power to control what we focus on, and our focus actually feeds how we feel. The second big idea is all around our story. And I've put here, your story sets your stage. The reason I've said that is because if you think about the story that you tell yourself on a day-to-day basis, it will usually determine the rest of your day, or usually determine how you show up to your day. So let's take a really basic example. Let's say you're going to a potential client meeting. So you're meeting with someone who, maybe they're an important client. Maybe they're someone that you're really hoping a big project's going to come off from them, right? And you go into that meeting, you sit down, you're waiting, maybe you're in the reception of their office or something like that, and some time goes by and you realize, you look at your watch and you realize it's 10 minutes past the time that they said that they were going to meet you. Now, they're the facts, right? That's the facts of the situation that I just told you. But as humans, what we do is we create meaning and we create narrative around all of the facts. So our brain doesn't just stop there, right? Our brain starts creating a story about why they're late. And you just notice that you do this with absolutely everything. So it might start saying things like, oh, well, maybe they're with another agency and they're currently in the pitch and they've overrun because they love it so much. Or maybe they've lost interest in meeting with me, or maybe they didn't come into work today. Are we sure they definitely came into work? And we start getting down this path, this narrative about why this thing is happening. And so we're doing this day to day with absolutely everything in our lives. And I'll show you how this all ties together in a minute. But we are very good at creating stories about the things that happen to us in our lives. The third and final thing, I learned this from Tony Robbins. And this idea, this concept fundamentally changed how I think about myself and how I think about my business. So suffering is selfish. That's a kind of a weird phrase, right? What we mean is if you think about suffering as any prolonged negative emotion, so staying in sadness for a prolonged period of time, staying in frustration for a prolonged period of time, staying in anxiety for a prolonged period of time, we're kind of suffering because we're staying in that emotional state. We're not able to get out of it. If that's kind of how we define suffering, we're talking about emotional suffering here rather than physical suffering. But if that's how you think about it, what you'll notice is that whenever you're in those prolonged states, or whenever you're feeling like, I just want to give up, what's the point in all of this? I can't be bothered, etc., etc. What you'll notice is that where you're focusing is purely on yourself. So what Tony Robbins talks about is he says that you cannot be focused on yourself and somebody else at the same time. You either have to be focused on someone else or you have to be focused on yourself. And what you'll notice is that when you're focused on other people, it's almost impossible to continually be stuck in that negative pattern. And so that's why one of the easiest ways to get yourself out of a bad mood is to go and do something nice for somebody else. But there's a little bit more complexity here. So when you're thinking in the specific context of business, when you're in one of those moods or one of those days where you're like, oh, it just feels like nothing's working. Why do I even bother with this? What does it mean? Does it mean that I'm a failure? Does it mean I'm not good at what I do? Etc., etc., etc. What you'll notice is that it's all about you. It's all, am I good enough? Why am I bothering this? What does this mean? The focus is purely on yourself. So one of the things I'm going to show you how to do is shift your focus from yourself and internally to focusing on externally and actually serving other people and actually having a focus that's bigger than yourself and beyond yourself. So these are the three big ideas. These are the three kind of key concepts that we really need to understand before I dive into the how-to. The first one is about the fact that what you focus on determines how you feel. And there are a million and one things that you could focus on right now. There's a million and one things going on right now, and you get to decide what you're focusing on. Okay, so we can control that focus. The second thing is just notice when you focus on that specific thing, what is the story, what is the narrative, what is the meaning that you give to those facts, to that situation. And then the third thing is notice that whenever you're in that funk, it's always about you. And if you adopt the belief that whenever I'm suffering emotionally, that's pretty selfish, as in it's pretty self-centered, then it starts to change how you think about this funk that you're in. So they're the high-level concepts. Now the question is, well, what do we do about it? And so I just want to introduce you to this concept of what I call the emotional triad. And so if you notice, there's a million and one things going on right now, and we choose something to focus on. And when we're in a funk, what we tend to focus on is we tend to focus on the things that are not working, right? Not working or not going the way that we want. So this client's not happy, this sale didn't go through, whatever it is, right? That's the thing that we're focused on. Then when we focus on that, what we do is we give that thing a meaning. We create a narrative, right? This client's not happy. That means I'm not good at what I do, or I'm not cut out for business, or fill in the blank, right? And then that makes us feel like we're not enough, we're not good enough, like we want to give up. And so this is constantly happening. Once you have this in your mind, the question is then, okay, what do I do about it? Because there's one thing being aware of something like, oh, I'm in the emotional triad, but there's another thing actually being able to do something about it, right? And so what I want to share with you is a 3-step process that we take all of our clients through when they are stuck. So when I'm coaching people, getting them unstuck, getting them to break through to the other side, to push through that time when nothing's going right, and that happens, right? Because the people we work with are extremely good at what they do. They are entrepreneurial, they are ambitious, they're very driven personalities, so they're reaching for these big goals. And oftentimes we'll get punched in the face quite a lot before we reach those goals. So I'd almost say that this kind of feeling of nothing is going my way, nothing is working, is almost a prerequisite to having a breakthrough. And so this is why these 3 things are so important. So this is the 3-step process to breaking through that funk, to breaking through that pattern. And I'm going to actually talk about how you do this right now. So the first thing is we've got to control our focus. Imagine you are the camera operator and you get to point that camera wherever you want to point it. Now, this is not to say that we're going to ignore all of the stuff that's going on. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting just positive thinking and we just lost 2 big clients and we're like, oh, well, we won't focus on that. We'll focus over here. We take the snapshot and we say, we acknowledge we've just lost 2 clients, right? But there's a difference between just keeping the focus on that and zooming in on it and getting the focus right and getting that picture really clear. And that's all we look at for the rest of the day or the rest of the week, or going, okay, I see that, I acknowledge it, I hear it. What else is going on? Do I have some clients that are happy right now? Do I have some things that went well before they left? Do I have some things that I can celebrate? Okay, cool. How do we create more of that? You see, that's a very different approach, right? So it's not pretending that those things don't exist. It's just seeing them through the lens, acknowledging them that they're there, and then deciding where you're going to point that lens. You can point it at anything that's happening. So almost imagine it. Another kind of way to think about it, I don't know if you're into photography, I am, but you start with the wide angle lens and you see like everything that's going on, because we don't usually do that. We usually start with a zoomed in lens. Something happens and we zoom straight into it, right? Like a sports photographer, we're just focused on the ball all the time, wherever it goes. And that ball is usually the problems. So rather than that, start with the wide angle lens, look at the whole picture. Let's really zoom out. So we acknowledge, yeah, we lost the client, but we also have this client here that's happy. We've got this team member that's absolutely crushing it. We've got new opportunities here. Well, we've got this going on, that, and just see the whole picture as it is, and then put the zoom lens on and decide what you're going to focus on. Okay, so that's the first thing. So now the question is, okay, well, how do we do that? And this is something really powerful that I learned early on, which actually got me into coaching. And I learned this from Tony Robbins. I learned this from, I think, his book, Awaken the Giant Within. And he talks a lot about this and the power of this. So if you think about it, what determines your focus right now? What determines your focus? Well, what determines your focus is the question that you get asked. Now, you might think to yourself, well, Matt, I'm not asking any questions. But if you slow down and actually listen to what's happening up here, we are constantly asking ourselves questions. So we lose the client and then we ask ourselves the question, why did that happen? What does that mean? What are we going to do? Right? So we're constantly asking ourselves questions. And so something I learned was, if we're constantly asking ourselves questions, then why not have some questions to come back to consistently that help us focus on the right things? And this is what we do with our clients. So every week, and sometimes this feels a little bit like one of those things you had to do at school or something when you first do it, and you're like, oh, doing the question thing. So when people first join, they're like, oh, we're doing this wins thing. Like nothing's really gone well this week. But every week we ask our clients for one win and one lesson. what could you celebrate this week? Because there is always something. What could you celebrate this week? Because the question, what can I celebrate this week, automatically takes me straight to focusing on the things that are going well. What did I learn this week? Well, that's making sure that I don't ignore the lessons, or maybe I haven't thought about that. And maybe what did I learn this week is an opportunity to reflect and figure out what are the lessons that I'm going to take from this to make sure that this doesn't happen again in the future. So you can design these questions for yourself. This is an example of some questions, but this is why people talk about things like gratitude, right? Write down what you're grateful for, because when you write down what you're grateful for and you ask yourself, what am I grateful for today? What am I grateful for this week? That question determines your focus. Something that I've been asking myself recently, which I found really powerful, is what am I proud of? What am I proud of this week? And it really helps you to notice the things that you're doing well. So I'll give you a really tangible example. Sometimes when I feel like nothing's going well and I ask myself, what could I be proud of? Do you know what? Actually, I'm proud that I'm still putting one foot in front of the other and I'm still showing up for my clients or for my friends or for my family in spite of all of this really difficult stuff happening. Some simple things. So I committed to going to the gym more regularly. And so sometimes I will go to the gym even when I don't feel like going to the gym. So what I write down is, what am I proud of today? Well, I'm proud of the fact that I went to the gym when I could have gone back to bed, or I could have just sat on the sofa or got on with work. I could have done those things, but I didn't. And so I'm proud of that. And this might seem a little bit trivial and a little bit stupid, but ask yourself these questions consistently and you start to change how you feel. You start to change how you perceive what's going on in your life. So questions determine your focus. And so what's the action point? The action point is come up with 2 or 3 questions that you can ask yourself on a daily or weekly basis that will force you to focus on the things that you want more of. And that's one of the keys here, right? This isn't just about, I want to feel good, like I'm just pretending that everything's great, smile through gritted teeth. That's not what we're trying to get at here. What we're trying to get at is, how do we push through to the other side? How do we push through this dip that's going to happen to everybody? How do we push through these dips in business when things aren't going well, when things aren't going the way that we want them to? And this is the answer. So this is really about getting more of what you want, not pretending that bad stuff doesn't happen, not feeling good all the time, but getting more of the stuff that you want, being able to push through, being able to build the business that you set out to build, being able to make an impact in the world with what you do. That's what this is ultimately about. So just before we wrap this up, there's 2 more things. Second thing is, everything that happens in our life are the facts. The client said they don't want to continue anymore. The relationship ended. The person got sick, whatever. The story we then create around that is our choice. The meaning, this is another one that I learned from Tony Robbins. Meaning is the molder of destiny, right? The meaning that you give to something determines what you do. So let's say a relationship ends. You could either make that mean that it's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, that means that you're terrible at relationships, you've been trying to make this work, that means that you're never going to find the person that you're going to be happy with and that you're going to spend your life with. Or you could make it mean that every relationship that doesn't work means that you're getting closer to one that does. You could make it mean that by taking the lessons from this relationship, your next one is going to be even stronger. So the meaning or the story, the narrative that you create around these things is so, so powerful. And I always quote, there's a great Netflix documentary that Darren Brown created. If you're watching this from somewhere other than the UK, you probably don't know who Darren Brown is, but Darren Brown is a magician, is a hypnotist. He's an incredible performer. And he created this Netflix documentary called Sacrifice. Now, I won't ruin it because it's an incredible documentary, but I'd highly recommend you go and watch it because it demonstrates the power of story and the power of narrative to influence someone's behaviors and someone's actions. And I've been lucky enough to hang around with some extremely successful people, not just successful people that have earned a lot of money, but successful people that have really made an impact with their work. Successful people that have really made or built something that's going to last and give them a legacy. something significant, people that I admire. And I'm always listening to how they talk about themselves and how they talk about their business and how they talk about the story. One of the people I follow is a guy called Alex Hormozy, who you might be familiar with. I've heard him being interviewed on a podcast the other day. And he said in the early days when he was running Gym Launch, he came across all these crazy challenges, right? He just didn't know how to make certain things work for gym owners. And he knew that every time he came against one of those challenges, if he could push through that challenge, then he would already be in the next percentage of people who pushed through and didn't give up. He knew that every time he hit one of those challenges and managed to push through, he automatically left a bunch of people behind who would never push through that because it was too difficult, or they didn't want it bad enough, or they weren't interested in it, and they would move on to the next thing. And so he knew that every major challenge got him closer and closer and closer to being in the top 1 or 2%. And it's one of the reasons his business was so successful, is because he managed to solve problems for gym owners that no one else in the market was solving at that time. And I believe one of the reasons that he did that was because the story that he created, or the meaning he gave, was every time I face one of these major challenges, these major setbacks, I'm getting closer to being the top 1%. I'm getting closer to building the ultimate business. You hear this story a lot with, I think it was Nikola Tesla, or I think it was someone like that, and they were getting asked about inventions. The journalist reportedly said to them, how do you feel about the fact that this invention has failed 99 times? And he said, well, it hasn't failed 99 times. I've just found 99 times it doesn't work. And every time I find a time it doesn't work, it just means that I get closer to finding the one that does. And so imagine someone with those two different narratives, those two different stories. One believes that every time something doesn't work, every time something fails, that just gets them one step closer to where they want to be. And somebody else has the belief or the narrative that every time they fail, it means they're not good enough, or they're never going to get this to work, or no one wants this, or whatever. Think about the two trajectories of those people. They're going to be totally different. Okay, so here's the final thing, and this is the one that we really try and hammer down for our clients, and this relates to the third big idea, that suffering is selfish. If you can find a big enough why, if you can find a reason for running your business, if you can find a reason for doing what you do beyond you like it and it makes you money, i.e., if you can find a reason outside of yourself, then it will be 10 times easier to push through these hard things. Because as soon as you focus on somebody else, as soon as you focus on that bigger mission, all those other things that feel like they're not working and it feels heavy, they all of a sudden feel light. And I know this because I've found something that feels like that. And I've had several businesses in the past that didn't feel like that. And the only reason I started them was from a selfish perspective. The only reason I started them was because they allowed me to travel the world and they earned money and I knew there was demand for them. And I got to a point where I just didn't want to carry on anymore. I'm now kind of 7 years into this business and I'm more excited about it than I've ever been. And the reason I'm more excited about it is because I am committed to building the world's best business accelerator for creative studios and creative agencies. I'm committed to solving the problem of bread and butter work. What I mean by that is I'm committed to eliminating bread and butter work. I'm committed to getting rid of those clients that just pay the bills. That's their only function. We don't really like working with them, but they're just there because they pay the bills. And that is not about me. That's about creatives. The reason I'm able to speak so passionately about this and talk for over 30 minutes about these things right now, it's the evening here, and I could be doing lots of things. I could be watching Netflix. I could be doing all this other stuff. The reason I'm not, and the reason I care about this, is because my why is bigger than me. So if you can find something that you care deeply about, whether it's the environment, whether it's politics, whether it's whatever it is, something that's a problem that you are committed to solving, that's more than just about you and your business growing and making more money and having more stuff and all of that stuff. If you can genuinely find something that you care about that's beyond yourself, all of this will become so much easier. So I'm going to land the plane there. I'm going to wrap this up. These 3 things will be the determining factor whether you give up or keep going. These three things will determine how far you go with your business. And so if you can catch yourself, if you can become conscious of what you're focusing on, if you can become conscious of the meaning that you're giving to that thing, and you can find something outside of yourself that is bigger than you, that's a dent that you want to leave in the universe, that's an impact that you want to make, which is about more than money, then you will go far. Before you leave, if you found this episode valuable, please hit the subscribe button. Thanks for listening. This is the Creative Courage Podcast.